So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be back on iDAC, and thanks for the invitation. And we have a very good panel sort of assembled here. Many discussions have happened to understand what the topic can be. So I would want a sort of a minute or minute and a half for each of the panelists to make an introduction or a critique on the idea. So what we are talking about is a sort of a didactic posture of looking at both modernity vis-a-vis vernacular. Can I have my slides? I'll just make an introduction to the topic using some project slides. So the point is that from time immemorial, of course, vernacular has always been uh, a space which becomes an educative kind of a realm, whether it is any kind of age or time or style that we've seen the work. Uh, it, the materiality always remains the same. There could be innovation in terms of the kind of spaces or materials or designs that we might innovate, but there is always a refer back to learn from the vernacular. This is our own studio. It's completely built like, for example, using the vernacular of how people used to build on edge lines of warehousing on riverbeds or seabeds, where they used to integrate both timber and steel as a wall panel, wall bearing, both tension and compression kind of a member. It is both structural, it is intelligent in terms of how you can articulate a space, or it also uses natural methods of construction using a vernacular base of lime mortar work, brick work, and using the terraces and green. So it really doesn't matter what is the kind of a style space or a geometry that we create. It could be as simple as a small home of 800 square feet, which again reciprocates or retracts back to the idea of vernacular in a subtle way, but can be very, very modern in its expression and the nature of how that experience can be. When you look at a very large building, like we built this project in the middle of Thane, which is actually a United Phosphorus Limited laboratory, where again we used extensive volumes of table mold, sun-dried bricks as a whole shading element to the vertical space of the wall. It is possible that I don't know how this works. Yeah, the whole building skin, in fact, is made out of bricks that's just manufactured in village quarters, and it is possible to use indigenous technology to bring an expression to how we, I don't know where this is, how we create a skin for a building and how we actually make a shading element or a shading device to a project. This doesn't seem to be working. I think the battery is down. So it is the sensibilities of such didactic composition of conversation is always whether not the yin and yang, it's always interrelated. So we have this kind of posture today that we are going to be discussing amongst each person to understand how we take a position. I think I will let you do your 1 minute critique till they manage to bring the slides back so we don't lose time. Saurabh.
I think vernacular architecture as a concept is very much relevant even today because the idea is very important. We can't just keep on building modern buildings which don't have any context to a location, to the climate. Like you can have a building in New York, same building can be replicated in Mumbai, same thing in Chennai. That doesn't make any sense. So I think a combination of vernacular as well as modern building has to be there to make the building timeless and make the person who is visiting the building and feel that he has gained something from there, visiting that building. He has understood the culture of that area or the ornamentation, artisans, somebody has painted over there, or even the local climate is very important for this kind of for a building. So rather than just going for modern for the sake of it, It has to be a combination of both, according to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would like you to continue the comment or your critique on the didactic position of both ideas.
Uh, uh, I think it should probably be an extension of what he had told as well. See, we hail from this part of the world. I'm sure all of you have your own this thing. So there's a very great saying by the great poet Bharatiyar. You know, he says, "Sendiduvir ettikkum konarga ella kalai chelvangalum," meaning travel across the world, but then you get back the best of art back to your place. So what can relate is only when you are actually relevant to the place and context in which you are actually making the stuffs. But of course, the exposure can come from anywhere in the world, but then you have to make it more relevant. It's only then, like what he said, that each of us are going to have our own specialities and uniqueness and celebration. Otherwise, just imagine all of us looking the same and irrelevant to the space and having a glass box in a hot space and then a completely sealed up stuff in a tropical area. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So that way, I would say, instead of taking it just by the look of it or the skin, if you can get into the depth and then start bringing in those kind of concepts, marry it along with the context in which we are present, and then we do it. So that's a typical good way in which I would say progressive architecture can be, you know.
Absolutely. I think that a very thin sort of connect has to happen. As I said, this is a project which is on a 24-acre piece of land in the heart of Bombay, where we built a 150 tall tower. The whole thing is terracotta. You generally don't get to see it from the road unless you get into the space, but it is possible to, push forward a bucket list where even for a very, very high-rise building, you can bring back the origins and the ideas of vernacular, how you have to protect water, how you have to protect soil, how you protect trees, how you respect Mother Earth and recognize that Earth matters. So each of these ideas has to weave itself even in a megalomaniac scale as high as this, which is a 5 million square feet facility. But I think that sense of introduction of the vernacular, like what you said, embedded in the nature of architecture and making of the building becomes very, very relevant to our time. And regardless of the scale, regardless of the nature of building type, or the nature of functionality that embeds that kind of an idea of a style. So it's important that it has to embed. I would like Milana to take over and present her critique supported with some images.
A very good evening to everyone present here.
Sorry.
I think it's a very interesting topic to discuss upon. I think we are at the journey of choosing the right direction in terms of building cities. How do I? Sorry. Yeah. So we are in that right. It's very important in today's day that we take the right direction. So we have a practice called VIVOSPACE Architects that we kind of started off 11 years ago. Vivo means life in Spanish, and our tagline was bringing life to spaces. So we always thought architecture has this beautiful language. Architecture is a language in a way, and it connects to the emotions of the user. I think when we start looking at that ideology and philosophy, every small space to a magnemic scaled building, I think as Ravi mentioned, it's going to be perfectly designed to suit that context and also brings in a certain balance to the lives that spend time in that space. So this is a project that I would like to talk about. This is built in Bangalore. So this is a residence. When the client came to us, I think we thought, what's the approach that we are going to choose? And then if you can see, we've designed this west-facing residence with a jali that we've designed with customized panels which are designed to beat the west light and heat. So the entire living space is positioned in the west. So this kind of is an example that I would like to present, wherein the idea of jali is kind of translated with an essence of modernity. So if you can see, these are images shot inside the house and the light is very well balanced. And even though it's positioned in the west direction, every part of this residence is something that we have worked out considering how the user is going to experience each part of that residence. And when we look at the other zones, I think in a scale of 40-60 plot, when we design residences, I think it becomes very important to work with right amount of volumes. And here we try to bring in that aspect of natural light and ventilation, which is the most important aspect, also bringing in that touch of modernity to it. So these are few of the visuals of that. And moving on to the next, which is a school project that we've designed in Bangalore. This is an institution that has brought in the brightest minds. And this is something which we these are few of the renders that we initiated initially. And the first image was the completed project. So here, because the school is Prarthana.in World School, so we wanted the kids to experience climate and seasons. And every part of the school is designed in such a way that we have kind of made natural surveillance an important aspect when kids are around in the school. The whole experience of how the children move in the school as well as how the teachers are going to move, everything was worked out. And when we achieved that project to its finish line, I think when we actually get a feedback from the clients that they don't use a single fan and light in the day, as well as the entire school is perfectly climate responsive. And the materials used here are kota, and we have, what you see as the jali is something that we've designed keeping parametric design in mind, and we created a weave. So because of this, especially few schools and institutions, when I hear when they are designed, they are something which they face an issue of natural light directly hitting the desk. Here, every classroom, every lab is designed in such a way that this is very carefully articulated. So this is one of our favorite projects. And moving on next, this is a retail store it's an optical store in Pune called the Bambusa Nest. So this is something which we thought we need to bring in a new touch to the retail perspective that's going on in our country. So this is created with bamboo and rattan. So this is being done. This is how we perceived, and we thought, why should the retail experience not be given a vernacular touch? So this is something that we absolutely loved working on. And this is a residence that we worked in Raichur, which is a tier 2 city, which is extremely hot. The client, when he actually happened to talk to us, he wanted to have a very flamboyant looking residence. But we thought, how are we going to bring in that idea and humbleness to that residence? So the whole experience of bringing that thought of home is what we wanted to achieve. So if you can see, this is the space that has the courtyards. We have multiple courtyards designed in this residence where the entire light, sunlight, as well as the heat is modulated, even though we've used large glass glazed areas. And the window systems are worked out considering the draft of air. So this is in the terrace floor. So moving on to another project, this is called the House of Tubes, which is again very carefully articulated, keeping the idea of vernacular design with modernity, where we've used limestone, which is a locally available material in Karnataka. So we've used limestone in the facade, and we are using a lot of lime plaster in the residence, but why not explore with different kind of forms and experience? So this is something which we thought would be a perfect blend to work with. And this is another project called the Trapezoidal House, which is oriented towards north. So the first floor of this residence is something that we opened up to the north light, wherein that entire light kind of translates until the ground floor, and we have carefully worked out the volumes and cutouts in such a way that the entire house is lit with diffused north light. Even this is placed, it's housed in Raichur. So the idea of modernity with the right use of materials can bring in a very different approach to every project. So this is another retail store. I'll just run through this quickly. This is that was in Hyderabad, and this is an apartment project which we kind of conceived in Bangalore. And this is a project which is with no common walls. So all 4 units and every floor is differentiated. And we wanted to bring in the idea of large balconies, and every space of this apartment has balconies dedicated for the users to experience green spaces, even though they are living in a micro, tight-knit community. So I think the idea of modernity integrated with vernacular architecture in a right balance could also bring in a very fresh approach to the idea of design, and it could also kind of uplift lives wherein the experience matters. I think that's where the emotional factor plays a larger role.
Thank you. I will request Ekta Agarwal, who's just popped in, to make a 1 minute critique on the didactic posture between vernacular and modernism. What is your take? How do they correlate or montage or separate?
Hi, I'm Ekta Agarwal from FOAID Designs. Sorry for being late, of course, for the traffic, of course. And for me, the take of modernity to the architectural, which is, become very popular in Western areas in 18th, 19th century, which we are much laid back and in India, we have just started now that I think in 20th century that we got more into the modern concept of the living. Vernacular, in the other hand, is more to the earthy materials. As she said, we use more of limestones and all that. So I think merging both together will always bring the best look in the house and bring our cultural heritage also alive, which we are losing out with the youngsters. So that is one of the main thing that we need to merge both together.
Absolutely. Prajwal?
Yeah, hi, this is Prajwal here from Centrik. So I'm surprised actually like all the creative minds are actually on the same page and we agree to, almost everything what we said. Happy for that. Well, I would like to start with a classic example of, when we always say that, when we speak about Kerala, like, we always talk about the slope roof, the clay tile, actually even that itself is actually so beautiful example of fusion of modernity and, vernacular because the technology is the beauty is that tile is not even from here. We did have clay tiles, but actually it's come from Germany in the 1860s, where a gentleman by George Plebs, who got the technology and he started selling. And today we all consider the moment we say Kerala or any of these areas, like we always think that it's our style, right? We always think it's we adapted that it's our culture, it's our heritage, right? So similarly, we have another classic example of Nikon. How Nikon had the technology, but they never adapted and they failed, and how Apple took over from nowhere, and today they are the world leaders, and Nikon and Canon are still struggling to get nowhere. So it is so important that adaptability of and also of technology and modernity is so important, along with keeping in mind the culture, the heritage, what we where we come from. So it is very, very important. Even you see our temples or palaces, how initial everything were built on stone, from stone. And eventually, like now Krishna Deva adapted, brick and, stone and brick, right? And then became only brick and stone, such that. But I think it is very important that, the fusion is, there. Can we have that project on?
Can you run his slides? Yeah.
So I'll just show you one very interesting project. There's an interior project for a client called My Home. So this is a project called Grava. So this is the newest thing in Hyderabad where, all the ITBs going to happen in the future. So it's called Grava. This is an experience center. A client took us for a site visit at a massive around 100-acre, land bank, and they said we are coming out with a crazy 15 million square feet, commercial building. And it was, and we were competing against, we had no chance, but we were, trying to get to them from a long time. They said, fine, you're too late, but why don't you try? And it was a big challenge because we competed against, some UK and Singapore-based and US-based architects. And one of them was a base building architects. And this was a site, it's massive. It's a crazy construction, crazy rock, and space. And we were given base -2 to build this, and we had a great challenge. What do we do? And we have very little time. So we spent some time on the rocks, and this is actually some little later stage where these pictures are clicked. But eventually, when we went, there's hardly anything. A lot of excavation. They have India's largest prefab factory right at the site. Also, stone, cutting and stone. The factory also is right there. So everything is recycled right there, and almost about 85% of the construction is actually, precast. So it happened right next to the factory. Sorry, next to the site, and it gets built. So it's an experience center for this building, which is 15 million square feet, building which is coming up. So these are some shots. So, I mean, while we're thinking, this is what we felt the day we went and sat, on the rocks there, and this is what we felt, and this is where we thought we should start. And, and this was the first project in that, 15 million square feet campus where, experience center, they want to build first, and then they start selling the space to their ITVs and everybody. So generally how temple is first formed and, around the river and, next, hence the whole ecosystem, the town, everything forms around the, temple. That's exactly what's the whole concept. So this is what we envisioned, this is how the project should be. And, and how they also had a beautiful story where they, they are getting a massive banyan tree from elsewhere and they're replanting. So that's going to be the base, right in the center of the entire campus. So we've thought about this like where it's going to be like a temple and a tree, and then the entire ecosystem around it. So, this is how we studied. This is how we entirely, conceptualized it. Where we have Rajgopuram, we have, Kalyani, and all the stuff. Few of these details, and this is the whole layout looks like where we have the entry. Plus, it's a minus. For basement, we have a lot of issues with heights. We have a lot of things coming in. We have like a lot of steps and stuff. So we thought we should celebrate that massive column. We have a massive expansion joints. So we thought we should celebrate all of this because this is it's in a construction site and we are selling ongoing construction building. So we celebrated that and we did enjoy a lot of heights. We have entrance. We have a complex around. We have Gopuram, we have, Kalyani on the left-hand side. So each one was welcome lounge and media room, conference room, all of that. So some interesting, sculptures also we made, which talks about, again, what we're talking about, modernity and, vernacular here. We have different kinds of technology and our culture and everything embedded with a tree in the center. So this is how, even though it's a basement, but they said, we need to do something which should be wow because we're going to have, this is going to be something one of a kind. So that was a thing what they gave. So we came up with this, in the basement. And that's the entrance reception or a hosting area where people walk in on either side, two doors. And they get down, they have some water body. Again, these are few lounge inside. On the left-hand side is Kalyani, what we're speaking about, and we have waiting lawn on the right-hand side. Some shots, and these are some multiple lounges, and we have pantry, cafe, and these are some, high-tech, touchscreen modulars and VR and AR and stuff. Executive dining. There's a shot of the boardroom again, and overlooking if you see the entire space, you can see one end to the other. There's almost a 38,000 square feet carpet area. So there's a cabin, empty cabin. And this is, again, we also added a pre-function area where they will be hosting some really big events. Yeah, that's a thing. And a small video to think. How do you play this? Can we have the volume, please? Oops. Okay.
As he will play the video.
Yeah.
I think, in one of the very famous epilogues that Kenneth Frampton writes in Critical History, I think every architect or architecture student must read that. He talks about a point where there's a death for modernism, and then it's almost, I think, 1854 or 1885 when a whole set of buildings were rammed down, which becomes completely inhabitable because of the nature of its existence. post that, Schulz in Germany writes a book called as The Timeless Way of Building, where architecture should almost, enhance an experience where you can. The vernacular is an embedded principle in the nature of eclectic work that we all try to practice and bring that nuances of history, historicity of construction into the new modern methods in which we build. So I ask you, how much does this whole crave to make this experiential nature of architecture dominant in making, the position of denying principles of the vernacular or principles of climate or principles of architecture that comes in your practice? I ask you that question. It does not have to mean only experiential. It also means about making a building look bombastic. We have this whole want that, as against what Van Eyck said, that a home or a house is most beautiful when the passerby doesn't even notice it. So it's in opposition to that. And all of us as architects want to present a position or present an experience, and that experience should become a humanoid which brings change to the person who would perceive that. In all that, there is accuracy, but how much do you think you have made that position different, where you've stopped being an architect and being more responsible, being more vernacular, being more climate responsive? So I open that comment to each one of you.
Can I start?
Yes, yes.
Can you just start with the presentation? Yeah, so great work by everyone. And when I got this subject, suddenly few words came into my mind, and I tend to think slightly different, and typically uh, I start associating that with other art form. That's what happens to me. So I went to the basics, and I really feel as an architect, it cannot be a derived formula. And every time we have to start afresh, and every time we have to evolve through a journey, and maybe every time we have that struggle whether to go for a path of modernity or whether we go in a vernacular style. So when I look at the art form, I really feel that the creativity plus skill is something where the art lives. So I really felt that every industry where the art is evolved, they always worked around the fusion. So if you look at percussions, if you look at the dance form, even you can look at the food, we are underwent the journey of a fusion. Even as far as our fabric, our fashions. So every industry where we are correlating ourselves with the art, you can everywhere find there is a good amount of fusion of a modern versus vernacular. When you look at the architecture, it's a blend of art plus technology. So even we have to think about, we are executing for 100 years, now the life is not of 100 years. So when that happens, the choices should be made in such a fashion that where we get that kind of a life cycle. So how to choose, that is something which as an architect we have to look at carefully, looking at the execution, looking at the art form, looking at the technology and the longevity as well as the user group. So this is timeless. The courtyards are timeless. Implementing them today it's redefining them. This is one of the project which I'm doing in Hyderabad, and we have tried to maintain the whole terrain and try to create those kind of a levels. So blending with the nature, but still it has a modern touch. Timeless monoliths. I mean, they were one material, single material carved out. But when I try to do that today, probably I come up with something like this, but I have to really think about the life cycle of these materials. And that's where certain things are the barriers, certain workmanship could be a barrier. So how to blend them correctly is every time a restless exercise which architect has to go through if he decides to go for a vernacular way. These were the marvels. I will call them a mimic. This is one of the project which is coming up. But again, as I said, that when you are trying to work around the vernacular and get the modern architecture blending together, we have to do that entire analysis and commit ourselves to certain style. Global modernity, staying in Mumbai, it's all high rises, handling the density. Now, handling vernacular to this scale is a very difficult task. So one has to make a right kind of a choice, what sort of technology we should use, whether these are the right kind of a spots where we can blend them together. You can have a vertical urbanism and blend them together. So if you ask me, I always feel that it's a balancing act and we should adopt and adapt the right kind of a strategy when the design comes to us. So that's from my side.
I'll ask Saurabh to make a comment about the
I think
continuity.
it was a very nice position. I really liked it. Uh, See, both vernacular and modernity both have their positives and both have their limitations. Like in vernacular, we cannot multiply, we can't scale it. We have to have some local materials. Whereas in modern, we have new technologies coming up every day. Like when there is a high density kind of a project where we have to make tall buildings, high rise buildings. So there is a limit to vernacular elements that we can take. There we have to take technology, the latest kind of innovations in concrete, the M80, M100 kind of concrete has to be used, higher strength of steel is to be used. So that material advantage that we have today, that has to be considered, but it has to be a context based. As I earlier said, it has to relate to the location, it has to relate to the time of that, I mean, when it is being made. So every time has a different history. Every time has a different ruler who wants to make things as per his wishes, as per his style. So that context has to be there. So maybe today's context, whatever is there, we have to relate it with the new technology, new materials, and we have to grab the kind of, suppose we are making a building in Rajasthan, so we have to understand the local climate, we have to understand the local material, but in the same time we have to use the local technology, the modern technology to scale up the things. So with that, I think we have to create some buildings which are volumetric in form, modern forms which are like parametric forms are there, modern this thing softwares are there. So we can just dream of any kind of building, any kind of form, using the local context, the local materials, the local art forms. So it has to be a blend of both, I think, to create a modern building of the future.
Ekta?
What I've seen your project is totally awesome. So we have to make the modern and vernacular together, and we have to merge them, as I said earlier also. And what I'm able to see,
No.
his project,
Your image.
which was like very beautiful, and it has been also merged with the local stone, with the stone artwork, and even here with the whole greenery all over the place, and with the glass facade. I think altogether merging is the only new era that we need to be in. And today in the modern world where all the kids are like running and they don't have time, so we have to give them in a small flat also, we can provide them with good stone work, we can give them a good white space, and we can give them a good living standard.
Yes.
So that is what is the whole thing that we need to merge over here. And that is what I think we all are working around by giving them the best of the materials inside the house, even though it's a huge facade, what we see in Bombay. Today, even if it is 1,000 square feet house, we are giving them a good living standard with a good living furnitures and open space as well in that 1,000 square feet. So that is what we need to do today, and that is what I think we all architects are doing the same thing, is merging together our old way of living and the new standards of living and merging them to our own living standards. I think that is what we need to do. And a lot of people that I know from villages, they don't even know how to take care of their kitchen or how to be, taking care of that whole area and keeping it up to that neat and clean after spending it so much of money to it. So we need to look into every aspect of it on their living standards as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You want to present some images and
Yes. Is it plugged?
present your argument?
No? So maybe
So
somebody
they're going to take a little time. So I'll jump on to another point till he can manage to put the slides on. See, there is a paradox today that we all seem to read. It's a paradoxical situation that exists, that the vernacular architecture is dying bad. It is deteriorating because in the name of new development, new projects, new building activities, we seem to be destroying tradition consciously. Also, the aspect that modernity will never position a posture of replacement. How much ever we include passive systems of ideas from vernacular, we might use limestone, kota stone, we might use many materials. But there is a sense of lacuna that we all read in our industry. Even Convinde's buildings will never survive. He was such a purist in his sense of architecture that he built in his time, they will not survive. Baku, Zaha Hadid's building will be broken in the next decade. It did not even survive 30 years or 20 years, 2 decades. Even our own buildings, I do not think there'll be that reverence from a new time or a new paradigm to recognize them as much as how we do to the vernacular. When you look at an old village home, you want to protect it. You want to nurture it so that the next generations can live and experience that. When you look at monuments, you showed many images of monuments. For us to recreate that ideation will be a big challenge. So there is an idea that modernity does not even come anywhere parallel to that method in which vernacular existed.
But don't you think the modernity is also going to become vernacular, or it is going to become age old? Because history repeats itself. And that's where the life cycle, if you look at the temple complexes, which is done in a monolithic stone, they are still surviving today. But what we are building today, that itself has some sort of a life cycle. And that sort of a longevity is not there. So what we are trying to mimic, that's what I use the word mimic. So that mimic has its own lifespan. And that's why just making a makeup or a lipstick on top of the building, it's not going to work. So how you evolve, and that's why I said that it's a choice which one person has to make or a designer has to make and convince the client that what we are saying as a vernacular, it's just a kind of a treatment or kind of a I would say a facade which has been created, an illusion which has been created through the materials. Some materials which could survive in today's context. And that's where we have to make a wise choice while blending them together. So then at least it gets that kind of a life cycle. Otherwise, you will see that those materials are ripped off or building are not looking good after 10 to 15 years. And that's where I feel that whatever material we choose, we have to look at them from the detailing perspective, and that's where the implementation is going to become more and more powerful.
I think using more and more natural materials which are going to age very gracefully is, I think, the first direction that we can head towards. Um, I think we should kind of consciously choose materials that are not going to age oddly. I mean, concrete is going to age in a certain way, wood is going to age in a certain way, stone is going to age, but they have a certain similar timeline in which they are going to age if they are built in the right way. I think that's going to solve this problem, and that's something as a conscious effort most of us are trying to head towards, wherein when we suggest something, when somebody says, no offense, but anything like ACP panels, but that's something which a lot of corporate buildings would have. And now when we see a lot of, I mean, the Wipro office, when we see, is designed with a lot of materials that are going to age gracefully. It's extremely climate responsive. There's a lot of analysis done. And when we looked at how we treated that school building, I mean, that's something, today it can be a school, tomorrow it can be a gallery after 15, 20 years. I think a building, when it can function, not being a school today and some other function tomorrow, I think when we design buildings very thoughtfully, which need not be a residence tomorrow. Maybe a residence can turn into a small gallery, which is already happening in Bangalore. We see a lot of government buildings transforming into art galleries, and there are also a few events that happen. People just go there to meet. Some community events happen. I think that's something which we need to look at, rather than looking at the function of that building today and designing for tomorrow. I think that's what I would like to
Probably
say.
I would like to sum up on what Milana said. I think it's more than design. I think we should celebrate the space. I think that is more important. And again, now like we were discussing, Anuja, I think we are back again now, human centric, well AP, lead, all of that. Actually, it's all started from there. And again, today I'm glad that actually in a different way we're coming back right there. And I think that celebration is so important. I think we can make that happen. I think we should take that as a change.
Actually, I think by using a natural stones or natural, a paint or a natural thing on a building is always better than using ACP or giving a look to it in a different way by giving a more commercial look to it. Because in today's time, we don't want that, too much of a office kind of a look. Instead, we need a very natural, even in a school, whether it's office, whether it's Wipro, whether whatever it is. I mean, we need more of a natural and more of a productive building than to a commercial building.
And just to add with what you said, Prajwal, if you look at our vernacular architecture, it was limited to the temples or it was limited to the houses. Now, once your user changes, and when what we discuss right now is only treatment to a facade system, but it was actually the spatial quality or the space planning and where the whole climatic condition and use of these materials or creating those spaces, creating the water bodies, connecting them through them, is the whole gamut through which the whole experience is making you feel vernacular. It's not only one element what you could implement and say that's vernacular.
True.
So it's a mix, it's a blend of everything which will get you to the right kind of sweet spot, I would say. So you cannot think about in isolation when we talk about the modernity or vernacular. It has to blend together.
Blend everything. Absolutely. So, I mean, like you said, even the temple, like it's just a small thing which is left. Imagine the history, what it would have been. I mean, if our palaces or a lot of other, like Nalanda University itself, would have been so much of a, learning for all of us today, right?
Yeah, just to sum up, I would say three things which strike my mind is like staying original. I think that's going to help us stay for much longer. And then making it soulful, whatever, whether it's big or small. If it's going to connect a soul, the whole point is like, things may change. I think you see most of the celebrities, in spite of their affordability, staying in the same house, not doing much about it, still living the same way. What is it in there? It's not materialism. There's an emotion in it. So I would say, as long as you're doing something soulfully, maybe it may reach the souls of many, and then the longevity of those kind of products are going to be more. Originality, I said, anything which is not going to look like another will at least have a second thought with anyone before they're going to pull it down. Anything which can be just familiar and very common is always going to be the first choice which somebody would want to knock off. And then the last one I would say, which is more relevant today, like just to pull one out of what she said, is flexibility. If you're going to make a space which is going to be really flexible to convert itself and evolve with whatever the space is going to be required for tomorrow, I think with these three things, being original, staying a little soulful, and then just making it flexible, I think we can also become that, whatever you would want to call that heritage or vernacular, old, however, nostalgic kind of people, because I think most of them would want to take this forward and not do much about it, you know. I think we don't have much of time. So all what we need today is like, you know, quick solutions, cost effective, and then really productive stuffs. So given that, I'm saying if you want to make life easy, just make spaces which are just going to make them feel like, you know, just come and sit and do whatever they want. I feel that's a way in which we will all have to practice flexible spaces. Yeah, thanks.
I just want to add one thing. Making a modern building with vernacular touch doesn't mean that we have to copy that old style, you know. Like we are making a modern building with a traditional touch, so we are maybe using a tile which is Italian marble look like, you know. That, according to me, doesn't make any sense. If we are making a modern building with modern material, it has to be contextual. It has to be, I mean, it has to be derived from the local advancements or local culture which is there and produced with those kind of, you know, modern artists who interpret those old style into a modern way. So that is also, I think, could be considered, you know.
I agree. I think it does not have to be a skin phase. It does not have to be something which replicates a certain immediate feeling of what vernacular will be, whether it is in its climate or its deed of material or surface. I think there's a nice statement by Mies van der Rohe where he says architecture is the will of the epoch translated to space. It is so important, like you said, you know, that you cannot lose your individual sensibilities to make that decision happen in building something that is primordial. I think our aspiration has to connect to that. But the question always is, how much will your building be revered for time immemorial and respected as much as, you know, the Mahabalipuram temples or the Belurs or the Halebi temples, and resurrected for centuries. You know, that's the biggest challenge. Like if you go to Pondicherry, I recommend all of you to make that one visit to one building called as the Golconda. It was built in the 1940s by an apprentice who was actually traveling from Japan back to Le Corbusier's office, and he happened to stop by, and the mother requested him to stay on for some time and build another hostel, residential facility. It was built in the 1940s. Even today, when you go into that building, I mean, very few people, it's very difficult to get into that building. You'll need some permissions and all that. But when you go there, there's a sense of, you know, immense reverence that will come to your mind when you see what the Japanese man built as a piece of modern architecture. It's completely made out of concrete. And it's spectacular that that experience survives that building for another 2 centuries. I think, like you said, it is important to bring a sense of architectural experience embedded into that building that will hold together, and vernacular becomes a backbone to learn from and reciprocate to that. You have some slides to show. You can, so that we can do that as a concluding remark and open the audience for any questions that you have. Till they, yeah.
Rush through quick, there's nothing much. I think, see, this was something which we wanted to do in Kotagiri, it's just proposed now. It's a contemporary mix, but then the idea was to, it's more of an area with birds and things like that, so that was the only thing which we heard And so what we wanted to do was the stilt, obviously. So we wanted to do it like a bird's nest, and the eggs become some kind of a unit. And so this is like this is how the whole space is, and it's about a 40-acre space which we have tried to do. So what we have tried to do here is just biomimic native stuff with birds in their nest or whatever, and then just evolve it. But we're just trying to marry the new technologies of using steel structures, which is all possible in that kind of a stilt. So just trying to do something that way. And as a cluster, something would look this way. So it's like, this is what we thought of, like, cutting the least bit of trees, don't have any elevated lights, so they don't affect the birds, and it's all a pathway lighting kind of thing. So this is one of the resort which we did back there, looking at the hill. The whole thing was like, the time was short. We wanted to marry a bit of Scandinavian idea in between a hill, because that's a quick thing which we wanted to do. The whole project got done in about 7 to 8 months' time. And the idea was we used a lot of local artisans to get into it and do a lot of random rubble, stone, and things like that. So that was one. I think it's getting stuck. So yeah, basically what I just wanted to reiterate was just the same, in the sense like, we can use the latest technologies, but then if we can try and make use of that for whatever context and purpose with which we are building for today, can probably make the space more relevant to both the past as well as the future. And just try to do that simple job of just passing the buck on to the next generation. Yeah, thanks.
Any questions from the audience? Thank you.
Mr. Kumar, actually, I'm sorry, but we're running out of time, so no question and answer round. Apologies.
Sure. So I think we can
thank you for that.
Have personal conversations. So when he started with the Bharatiyar, I'll end with the Bharatiyar. Idhanai idanal ivan mudikkum endrai.
Adanai avan kai vidal.
If this has to be done by this person, it will be done.
Just get the right person to do the right job. Exactly. The rest of it is taken care.
So the craft, I think it's very important that all of us as architects have to get the craft right. If a carpenter cannot get his carpentry right, he'll be abandoned. Yeah. Unfortunately, if architects don't get abandoned. Yes, thank you.